Estimating the Right Way with John Kenney, CEO of Cotney. He is going to take it away and teach you everything about estimating. He is the guru here, so please enjoy. All right, John, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. Good to see everybody. I'm glad everybody can make it today. We're going to jump into our presentation, which is estimating the right way. So some of the things that we're going to cover today is going to be the penalty of not training your estimators properly. We're going to talk about the consequences of using inexperienced estimators. We're going to cover the estimator versus the takeoff person. We're going to talk about checking up in your estimating department, doing a proper checkup, and the importance of the weekly estimating meeting, making the most of the pre-bid, and risk management in estimating. And then finally, we're going to talk about some key principles at the end for submitting better bids. So contractors must use properly trained estimators for multiple reasons. One, you're going to pay higher costs for wrong estimates if you're not using a properly trained estimator. And in our business, the majority of contractors more have gone out of business by poor estimating and not having their costs correctly with job overruns than they've had with, having an operational disaster in the field. So the number one reason for going out of business in our industry is poorly put together estimates and improper costing. So before we cover what to do, let's take a look at some of the consequences. So some of the consequences are, what would happen is you don't want to start out a young potential estimator on the wrong foot. That is the worst thing you could possibly do, getting them in with bad habits, or they're not going to want to do it. They're not even going to want to train up. They're not going to like it. They're not going to do a good job for you. Excessive amount of labor to get that estimate complete. It's going to take a lot longer for someone that's not trained to go ahead and put the estimate together, which means you got less bids going out the door, affects your hit ratio, bottom line, and so on. And today, everybody's, really into using the softwares for estimating. I am a proponent of using the softwares. They're not an estimator. They are an estimating tool. So if you're not trained properly how to put estimates together, you're going to have very poor efficiency on operating this software. Lack of proper understanding of potential labor risks. If someone doesn't really understand what we're doing, they are not going to pick up your risk analysis and have the proper labor put into a bid. It's either going to be way too high or way too low. Lack of quality and accurate takeoffs. That is a huge problem in the industry of not getting the right takeoff done, the right amount of materials. And for a matter of fact, I've seen people miss roofs in this industry on sectional ones, which is amazing. Consistent low bid or excessive high bid numbers. This is probably the number one red flag for any company in an estimating department. If you have an estimator that is consistently low or consistently high, they are probably not a very good estimator. You want someone that is in the zone that can get the job sold, but you don't want somebody with a 0 hit ratio or an 80-90% hit ratio. High hit ratios are really, really good if you're a negotiated company and you're really dealing with your own customer base and you expect to see higher. But in the average, you want to be sort of in the middle. And of course, at the end, your company reputation is at risk with your clients. That's a huge problem. So what is the key, right? The key is picking your team. Finding the right person is key. Hire that person who has the necessary skills to become a quality estimator. Invest in quality and intense training and provide them with good structure and organization. That is key in any part of your company, but especially on the estimating side. So the estimator versus the takeoff person. So finding the right person for your estimating department is absolutely challenging. A takeoff person is no more an estimator than a laborer is a roofer. Now, what I mean by that is you can have some people on your team. A lot of times it could be on the service side of your business. They could be a technician. They can do excellent takeoffs and get the information back, but that doesn't make them an estimator. That makes them a great takeoff person. And a takeoff person trying to function as an estimator is costly, extremely costly. You're going to see mistakes left and right. So placing unskilled estimators in this position without having them with a proper philosophy of estimating to understand what it's about will prove to be a hindrance to your company's success. So let's talk about some guiding principles, to keep in mind. So what you want to do is make sure you're matching the responsibilities of the job position with the employee's abilities. So again, let's go back to that, takeoff person and estimator. A lot of people that have started out and worked their way up, coming out of the field, becoming a takeoff person, can be properly trained as an estimator. But that doesn't necessarily mean they have the abilities to do so. So you need to match that. So you're not over promoting or wasting time and effort in getting someone into a position they can't do. Always look for potential. A lot of times in the industry, we overlook, our field foreman, our service technician, or even for that matter, going into the front office, somebody in administrative. They have the ability to want to learn. They're good at math. This is what they want to do. Look for that potential so you can train them. Always have a detailed job description for every position in your estimating department. As you grow, you're going to have junior estimators, just we talked about a takeoff person. You'll have a senior estimator. You're going to grow in eventually as you get large enough to have a director of estimating, chief estimator, and you may have a vice president of sales and estimating. Everyone should have a detailed job description. That is also true for every position in your company you should have, but especially keep that in mind for an estimator is not just an estimator. They want to know what is expected of them. Just like good habits, bad habits are extremely hard to break. Therefore, provide quality training for employees. Don't assume that someone actually knows what they're doing. When you're going to hire somebody or bring somebody in estimating, I used to do this all the time. Give them a short test. Test their abilities. Give them a sample estimate in your company. Doesn't have to be one that's going to take a long time. Make it very simple. I had an exercise set up where I would be able to give this to a potential estimating candidate, and it would take them 5 to 10 minutes to put it together. But if they didn't know the basics of what I was asking, they would not pass this test. So it's better not to bid a project than to allow someone without the proper skill set to perform a proper estimate. So what I mean by this, let's say you do have a well-trained estimator, but their experience is in X. Let's just use they're a very experienced roofing estimator for your contracting business. But let's just say you have a waterproofing division, or you might have a siding division, or something else that you're doing, green roofs, all kinds of different solar. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have the skill set to jump into putting one of those estimates together. If I'm the estimator and I've been bidding all your commercial roofing estimates and you throw me into a residential area, I may not know all the ins and outs of that. Same way if you want to do solar and you kick me into the solar part of it, I may be lost. So make sure that you know the skill levels and what they're comfortable in bidding before you sign these out. So you're not going to save any money when you compensate low-skilled employees that require some higher skills. What I mean by that is if you can get, let's be realistic, if you take a well-trained, highly productive estimator, say you're going to pay them $100,000 a year, you can't look at it as, well, I can get 2 underskilled estimators at $50,000 and produce twice as much of the work. No, it doesn't work that way. You're probably, depending on how low skilled they are, it could actually cost you money in the long run. So keep these things in mind when you're looking. And always hire the right person with the right skills to do the job. Estimators, by nature, have to be organized. An unorganized person does not do well at estimating. Now, I'm not talking about your desk being clean, not having any files around. That's not the type of organization I'm talking about. I'm talking about organization and how they put their estimates together. There has to be organized patterns to doing this, A to Z, and an estimator has to do it the same way every time to limit errors in that. So always make sure you've got the right person in, do a skills test, do a personality test, whatever it may be. Estimators are definitely a breed different than a lot of other people in your company. So, look at estimating department checklist, and anybody here today, you can reach out to me. I see they got the app and everything. Send me an email. I'll be able to send you some of the stuff back. I've got some great information that you could take back and do your own checking up in your department. And I'll be happy to send it to you in a PDF format. But points I want to cover today is you need to know the health of your estimating department. That is no different than knowing the health of your operations team, the health of your financials, your collections, your cash flow. You need to understand the health of that department. It's got to be, like I said, it's got to have good organization. It cannot be haphazard, just throwing bids out there. It has to be an organized machine. So once you get a detailed organizational structure in place, right? Once you get all that down pat, you've got to have effective leadership to run this department. Now, depending on the size of your company, it could be a senior estimator overseeing a junior estimator, but they have to report to somebody. If you don't have a chief estimator in place or you don't have a vice president position in place, then you as the owner more than likely are the ultimate responsible leader of that team. So you have to make sure you're taking that on in your position. So your estimating team will work more effectively with good organization and strong leadership. I can tell you the 45 plus years that I've been in the roofing industry, when I got into the estimating end, coming up through the ladder back in the 80s, the estimators, like I said, do not work well with disorganization. And if they don't have a strong leadership leading them, the department goes awry and you're going to get poor results. Estimators like to know the person that they're reporting to is leading them and is going to have their back. Now, mistakes can happen, but when a mistake happens, it's got to be corrected and it's got to be done as a team effort. Estimators definitely need that leadership and it has to be structured. So is this person running your estimating team trained with the leadership skills and structural understanding of how to run the department? What I mean by this is I've seen a lot of mistakes over the years where you take your best estimator, which would make sense, and you say, okay, you're going to run my estimating department. I've got 3 or 4 or 5 estimators. This is your team. Go ahead. This is what's expected to you. We'll meet. We'll get together. And this may be this person's very first time into a leadership and managerial role. So they may be the most competent and well-organized and most profitable estimator you have, but you got to take the time. Someone needs to train them and give them the skills to manage and lead. Without it, you're not going to have a successful outcome. Develop your estimating principles that will minimize mistakes and provide you with confidence on bid day. So you have to have a system in place to review your estimates. Somewhere, if it should be in writing. There should be a checklist that the estimator will do his initial check, then it'll go maybe looked over by someone else in the department if you don't have a head estimator, and finally the head estimator, and then maybe all the way up to yourself as the owner. But that should be in writing. So by the time it gets to whoever is feeling, whoever's in charge of that, you're going to have confidence that the bid's coming to you has been checked and you're not going to find silly mistakes. I can tell you over the years, I have found estimates where they've missed the screws, missed a layer of asphalt, even missed cover board because no one checked it by the time it got to me in the review process, which is very frustrating. So checkup questions, right? So are your estimates completed a minimum of 24 hours before the bid is due? So this is extremely important to get your estimating team into this habit. I know there's always circumstances, but you want to make this your norm that a day before, 24 hours before the bid is due, these estimates are completed. So they're ready for review. So if there is an error found, you have the time to correct it, or someone actually has the time to make adjustments if they feel the labor's not right. You want to have your ops team jump in on it. There's nothing worse than jamming an estimate down, even like if it's public bidding right before it's due, and you don't know if your package is ready, you don't know if everything's correct, puts a lot of pressure and stress on, and that's where mistakes happen. Do your estimators maintain a quotation file? The answer should be yes. Now, today it's a lot easier with all the electronic software and the follow-up and the CRMs and the estimating, but it's okay if you're not that size company to have, the manila folders, as long as each job is got a list of quotations and sub-quotes. So, how did you get there, the takeoff? It's okay to be manual. If that's where you're at, that's fine. But even if it's electronic, you still need to have the same information. It needs to all be there: plan, specifications, takeoffs, quotations, subcontractors, anything that goes into that bid needs to be kept together. Do you have a master list of bid exclusions and qualifications? Highly recommend in your company that you put a master list together. So what I mean by that is, so when your bids go out the door, if you're excluding something normally, could be wood blocking as an example, or skylights, whatever it may be, every bid goes out the same exact way. If you have certain qualifications, which you should have on your qualifying documents, you want that to be pre-done. So every bid that goes out your door is put together the same way and looks the same way with exclusions and qualifications. Now, there are certain job specific ones that you'll change, and that's fine. You'll note them separately. But, you know, I can tell you that I've had issues where the estimators wrote their own proposals or their own scope, and it wasn't, you know, these master lists. And somebody said they included wood blocking, but the problem was they never estimated the wood blocking. So as a company, we did not do wood blocking at the company I was at then. So it was a normal exclusion, but it was not in the master exclusion list. The estimator never took it off his general proposal, and bingo, we got stuck with the wood and the nailer and the labor and the cost when the job was signed. So do you have an estimating sequence for your estimators to follow? So again, I'll be happy to send this to you if you guys email me. But what, you know, typical estimating sequence is how you prepare your bid. You know, do you look at the bid filter? Are we bidding it? You know, what's the takeoff sequence? Is someone going to go out and do the takeoff? We have core cuts done, all the way up to who's got final review and who submits it, and how it all goes together. When I look at putting a bid together, actually, I always believe in building it the same exact way you're going to install it. Start at the deck, make sure your estimators work that way up to the very finished product, you know, set up safety, work the deck up for insulation, trim metals, scuppers, downspouts, whatever it is, and off the building and out. This way here, every time it comes for review, it looks exactly the same. You know, do you have an estimate checklist? Again, this doesn't have to be very, you know, complicated put together. It could be simple as, I'm John, I'm your estimator. I'm a junior estimator. I got to report to Rob, who's a senior estimator. So when the time comes to get my bid done, I have another checklist that John has to check off that he's went ahead as myself. And I went through all the math. I made sure all the everything's accurate, the pricing's right. Then I hand it over to Rob. Rob does his initial check on it. That's checked off. Then it goes to our chief estimator, and then finally up to whoever's deciding on what the price profitability of the job is, right? So that it could be simple, but they know it. There's a checklist in the file. Somebody goes back to audit the file at the end. If there's a problem with the job, you know it was done correctly or incorrectly. Do you have a bid follow-up policy? I could tell you when I was in the position of running estimating departments, or even as COO of a company in charge of the sales, estimating, and operations, when I used to run these sales meetings, my bid follow-up policy was the simplest. I recommend you follow it the same way. No excuses. Until the job is either dead or sold, it's followed up on. I would not accept, yeah, I left a message, or I'm going to call them back. No, I want to know what happened. And then when the job is dead, you know, you get a sale, you know what happens then. It goes to contract and moves on. But when that job is dead, I'd like some feedback, and I would not accept, oh, we were high. Now, that's not good enough. If you know, properly trained estimator starts to build relationships, and it's not, most people are not comfortable, nor do I recommend you say, oh, well, exactly how many dollars high was I? Just say, look, you know, was I third? Was I fifth? Was I second? They'll say, well, you were 3 out of 5. All right, well, how far off of the front leader was I? 5%, 10%? They'll give you that. Most people are comfortable giving you that, and that starts to build you feedback in that you can take with your estimating department and start when you're doing your reviews of your estimators and your hit ratios. You know, you'll find where they stand, how they're getting them. So always require the information coming back. It's a gold mine of information for you managing your company and your departments. So, and as an estimator, you should have this information. So as an estimator on follow-up, what I wanted to know is if I'm bidding for client A, client B, and C, and more others, But client A never gives me a job, and they always say, oh, you're high, you're 10% high, you're 10% high. Well, then I'm probably just a bid machine for them because they've got a relationship with somebody else. So an estimator should pick up on that. I had no problems when I was an estimator saying, you know, Joe, I think you're a great guy. I love submitting bids to you, but you never give me an opportunity. Well, you're never low. Well, I don't think I'm ever going to be low with you. So I cannot waste my time. It's not worth my company's time. I got to go after work that I can get. And you cut your ties and move on. The 80-20 rule, right? And do you have a turnover project handoff procedure of the successful estimate to your project management team? So, you know, you should have a formal written policy on how to hand these jobs off to your operation team. The more the more information that comes across in a similar manner to your ops team, they're going to know if something's missing, if it was a bad estimate. They're going to have, or most important, they're going to have confidence in your estimating team when they're turning these jobs over, that they can go confidently put them down and they're going to come in on budget and on time. So you want to make sure you have a handoff procedure in place. So the importance of the weekly estimating meeting, right? These are the key points. Maximize, when you want to hold these, you want to maximize your resources. You want to create a purpose. Top priority is to address current and future estimates in these meetings. Make it routine. It should be, I always like doing the same day, same time every week. Yes, sometimes your estimators would be at a pre-bid and couldn't make it, but you consistently had people showing up and they would turn their information in ahead of time if they couldn't make it. You want to review successful bids and completed jobs, and you want to study your estimating history, right? You'll provide valuable information for your estimators. When you build these databases up, there is nothing better for success in your company than to use your own historical data of how well your teams have performed based on your estimates that have been that you've won, right? You want to build up on that. I could tell you, you know, I used to look at it this way. When we were in the companies that were 50, 60 plus $1 million, you know, we were doing anywhere from, of course, under $100,000 job up to 5 to 10 to almost $15 million projects. And certain ones we were successful at, certain ones we weren't. I mean, I went in and did this study. This is going back a few years where, you know, for whatever reason, we could not do a certain type of school bid, no matter how much money we threw at it, and never be successful. So we looked at it and said, look, this particular roof system on this particular project in the 30-year history of this company has never, ever came in on budget. We got to move on to what we do very well at, which happened to be very tough hospital tear-offs at this particular company. So we focused our interest, went after more of those and industrial type tear-offs, and we became even more successful and even more profitable. So this all comes from your historical data that you can focus your estimating team. So, you know, when I talk about maximize your resource and create a purpose, no one needs a meeting, right? There's nothing I hate it more than having meetings, but these are absolutely important. And I recommend them weekly because too much gets lost every other week as far as what's hot, what's not. But have your purpose. You know, I've taken these. I remember when some companies are an hour and a half, 2.5 hours, way too long. I got these down by having everybody get their information into our systems ahead of time. Everybody kept it updated. We would, you know, when an estimating department located in 4 locations and a total of 10 estimators, we can knock one of these meetings out in 45 minutes. And that included the service sales division on top of it in there. So again, have a purpose. You get your information. People are happy to give it, move on, get your team and do it. So it's very important to have these meetings. You know, part of it is data, right? So again, there's a ton of software systems out there that you're probably using in your company, whether you're a residential contractor, a commercial contractor, a mix of both, waterproof or siding, does not matter. You want to still always look at this in some sort of a recognized state so it makes sense. You got to have this in software. When I love using Smartsheet, that's a product I've used over the years, ties in with a lot of them, but whether you're using the Edge or using a CRM, using the multiple amount of other ones that are out there, use them, utilize them, keep the information in, and these are what you look at in your estimating meetings. So, you know, a simple example, we created a sales pipeline, real easy, right? So this one's a little more complicated. You don't always need to have this, but we have all our estimators set up. We look at the estimating, and really, you know, you got your to-be bids, right? That's your active list coming up. Like we said in the thing, you want to discuss those. What are we bidding? Make sure that one estimator is not overloaded compared to another. Make sure the right estimator with the best skills is bidding on that type of project. Then you've got, you know, I always like to call your budget estimates. I don't spend a lot of time on these in the estimating meetings. These are our great clients that we put bids in, estimates for budgets, so everybody can decide when they're going to build it. It could be a year, it could be two. So you just kind of, you're tracking them, but you're not talking about them in every meeting. Then you got your, you know, your three categories, or actually four that I like, is active, warm, hot, and contract to be signed, right? So the way I broke it down running an estimating department, I looked at the active bids as bids that were out on the street that could take as long as 6+ months to close on. That happens a lot, especially if you're bidding on new construction or doing a re-roof that's got to go through multiple channels to get approved. And unfortunately today with material issues, it could also kick it down the pipe. But then we went to warm. So warm is where it started to happen. We start to put some magic to it to really understand it. Warm, I looked at as we had it was a client that wanted to do business with us. It was somebody, you know, in that group is people we've worked with before or really want to work with. And we felt we had a 60% chance or greater of getting that job, taking it to the end and closing it, right? So that would be warm. And it also needed to be closed within 90 days. That's how it got into that category. If it didn't fit those, it would stay inactive and we beat it up down there. Then we have a hot category, and hot was 90 or better chance of getting a project. It had to be somebody that really wanted to work with us, that we really felt was looking at another client, another roofer, but we thought this was coming our way, right? So it's 90%. It's got to close in 30 days. That's the key, right, to get into hot, so that we're really on top of this in every one of our meetings. And then I created this category, and I didn't come up with this on my own. A lot of other people did it, but I called mine contract to be signed. That was basically, it's beyond hot. We don't have a contract yet. We have a contract to be signed, but it had to be this. You either had to have a handshake, an email, a verbal, hard verbal letter of, you know, of intent, or a letter of intent. That put it there. But here was the kicker, right? Estimators love to claim sales. So how I did this was I said, fine, if you put it in to the contract to be sold, and this thing is you know, you just put it in there to get at it, you know, get your ratings up, and it doesn't close, then you're going to lose X amount of dollars off your next week's paycheck when it falls apart, and there's no possible reason for it to fall apart other than it didn't belong in there. Of course, things happen. That made this category extremely successful because no one wanted to be basically embarrassed in front of their peers, right? But what we use this category with, this is the first time now that our operations team received an automatic notification that said, hey, you know, Ocean Prime got put into contract to be signed. You know, they would know it was because of the information. It was a $300,000 job. It is a built-up roof or TPO. It doesn't matter what it is. Now our operations team, and it's scheduled, the basic schedule is 3 months from today. So our operations team now had their first chance to take a look at what's coming down, you know, the pipeline that they need to get prepared for. No one's getting serious to get into handoff submittals because we don't have a contract, but my operations folks could take a look at it and see if we have a problem in our schedule or it was a perfect place where it needs to fall. So you're just kind of giving everybody a preliminary look at it. That's why I created those. And then, of course, you've got your normal dead, on hold, and contract. Once it goes to contract, it falls out of here. So making the most of the pre-bid. So, you know, the pre-bid meeting and the site visit are two separate steps in bid preparation. So pre-bid meetings sometimes are held at the project locations and sometimes they're not. Pre-bid meetings are to clarify concerns from the bidders, which may be a solicitation document, scope of work, and other details. And a lot of projects don't have pre-bid meetings. But if there is a pre-bid meeting, it is always good practice, best practice to have someone attend or at least get a copy if you can of what the pre-bid meeting notes were. And a lot of times they are mandatory, especially in public works and that you cannot bid a job unless you attend. So your team needs to be aware of all this. So site visits, right? Some projects, especially your negotiated ones, they don't have pre-bids and they don't have formal site visits. But it's always best that someone needs to visit that project site if you're estimating it. Doesn't necessarily have to be the estimator. I know I've worked with a lot of skilled trained estimators, and even myself over the years. We had a takeoff team. They went out, they did the core cuts, they got the photos. You know, we had a checklist for them, check the deck, look for bad wood, the whole list. They come back. It was just like you're being on the site. Plus with the drones and the aerials and all that, you can see a lot. But even if you have all that, someone still needs a re-roof. You need to visit the site. Technology hasn't got us there yet, but there's no way to know the decking, the pitch on the roof, whether it's tapered, not tapered, or for that matter, even a residential, whether you've got a ton of bad deck or not. So, you know, I realize smaller residential, you're probably not going to do it. But once you start getting into the larger projects and anything on commercial needs to be checked. Site visits, you know, the easiest way to mitigate risks, right? Get it in there. You're going to know the site conditions and a lot of other things, you know, that you're not going to know unless you visit the site. So again, risk mitigation on the beginning of the job. So risk management and estimating. So a lot of things I talk about and teach and work with contractors is risk mitigation across the board. But risk management and mitigation really starts up at the estimating end, and it's pretty easy. Doesn't take a lot of work or a lot of money or anything else. It's preliminary risk analysis, commonly known as PRA. Really simple, right? What does it do? It prevents you from wasting your resources, the useful factor in selecting projects to bid, and you just have to ask a few simple questions. So what I did was I put a filter together for the companies that basically no one ever had to go to anybody and say, should I bid this job? They went right on down the line with yes and no answers for an estimator to look at it at a project. If it fit all the yeses, it was a bid project. If it fit, you hit a no in any one of those categories, we wouldn't be bidding it. So you need to know your organization, right? What I mean by that is you're going to be good at some things, you're going to be okay at some things, and you're going to be horrible at some things. Nobody wants to admit they're horrible at things, right? But you are. I don't care who you are. There's just certain projects you're not going to do very well on. So you want to you know, take that in consideration and know that up front. And also too, I'll go into these risks, right? So and I'll jump back on this. Identify the risks that are worth taking and the ones outside your company's comfort zone. So there's schedule risk, there's pricing risk, there's backlog risk, there's contract and general conditions risk, and there's insurance, right? So what's involved in a schedule risk? Schedule risk could be a couple things. You have, you know, do you have enough time to bid the project? Does it fit into your schedule? You know, all things like that are schedule risk. Pricing risk. So what I mean by pricing risk is not making a mistake. We're going to make the assumption now that everybody's got trained estimating teams. We feel really good. But let's go back to what we talked about. I'll give you an example. Back early in my days, we were very good at commercial roofing where I was at. This is back when I was in New Jersey. And this product came into our area. You know, at that time, you know, it's the laminated panel, but it was particular manufacturer came in. You know, we had the metal bonded to the plywood. So we had this architect we worked with for years, small job. It was a canopy system around the front, not very much. But of course, even then, the material was 10 times the amount of what the labor will cost you to do it. So that's where the problem came in. So we bid this project and we felt really good. We had enough money in it. Well, lo and behold, it did not go very well, was cut wrong in the field, had to buy more panels. So bottom line is a $10,000 at that time, which was still a good chunk of money, $10,000, $15,000 add on to a project cost us like $30,000, $40,000 just to get it done. That was outside our comfort zone. So that's what I mean. So example, you're doing a job and you're really good at doing up to $250,000, $300,000 project. And you now have an opportunity through one of your great clients to bid on a project that's going to be, say, $1.5 million. That's a pricing risk. So what you need to do is have something in place, right? It goes back to your checklist. It doesn't mean you shouldn't bid it. This project could be perfect for you, but you need more eyes on it. You may want to talk to your operations team a little deeper. You want to make sure that you've got the cash flow to man the job, you know, to fund the job. So these are what I mean by pricing risk. Don't get involved in something that is going to take you down. Make sure the eyes are up on the front end. And backlog risk, that's exactly what it means. Too much backlog, too little backlog. So again, you want to adjust your pricings in the type of job. If you got a lot of work going on or you can't get material, your backlog's big, you got to raise your prices up, right? If you do hit a job, you find a way of getting it done, but you're going to make more money. You don't want to keep the same rates going throughout, depending on your backlog. You want to adjust it. Contract and general conditions. Yes, estimators should be looking at the contracts they're going to sign, especially if it's a new client, and the general conditions of the job, which is in the specifications of the bid package. I can tell you now, this includes bid forms. Great way now, a lot of owners, and it's not just general contractors, it's consultants, it's also building private owners will have a bid form. And I've gone through this and I've seen it 1,000 times where there's a box somewhere on there where you either check it or you write, or you check yes or no, or you write yes or no. And, the person getting the bid will say, well, if you got any no's, you're probably going to be disqualified. They have to be yeses. And one of the questions on there is, you have read our conditions of our contract and you agree to sign this contract without making any changes whatsoever. Bam, you get the job. Now, guess what? You find there's a clause in there that's going to put you out of business. You can't change it. So that is a time where, if you have a bid bond and you can't change it, you got to walk away. They can take your bid bond money. If you don't have a bid bond, you can probably fight it and walk away. But again, if you do this stuff up front, you don't have to face this in the end. So you want your estimators to have a way of checking this. And insurance. Now, you normally carry insurance up to X amount. You want to know when you're bidding projects, is there any special insurance requirements? I'll give you an example of this. We were working for a client. We've done a lot of their work back about 10 years ago, 5 years ago, somewhere in there. And it was a hospital. We go ahead and do it. And my estimator goes and puts it together. Everything comes through, checklist. Everything looked great except for one thing. He missed the fact that the job required an additional $10 million insurance rider than any other job. This got all the way up through the contract stage. Somebody signed the contract, one of the owners, didn't pick it up. Then it came to me. I was COO, running with the operations team at the time. And what happened is we had to get the insurance because we were bound by contract now. Call up the insurance agent and say, oh yeah, we can get you that rider. It's $75,000. Well, it was still a $2 million job, but that's $75,000 out of pocket. So anyways, risk management, we should have been done in the early end, but how this came out is we were able to buy a rider for the entire year for $20,000. So at least we didn't go out of pocket the additional $60,000, $70,000. So anyways, these are what I mean by that. Look into these as you're going along. So key principles for submitting better bids, right? Bid the right projects. We covered that. Don't bid something you're not good at. Don't bid something you shouldn't be bidding. Bid the right projects. You want to have your funnel tight and you want to get the bids out the door, but you want them to be the ones you have the most chance of being profitable on. Visit the site and attend pre-bid meetings. So again, new construction, there's nothing to visit, but they may have a pre-bid meeting. Again, if it's a re-roof, commercial building especially, you have to visit the site and know what's going on. Seek project clarification. So again, if someone is not sure in the beginning when they're bidding something, if it's right, reach out to the designer, reach out to the contractor, reach out to the owner, whoever put the specifications together, and ask your questions and put them in writing, because it'll save you a lot of problems later in the end. Again, if you're the one putting it together, you want to make sure that your specifications and your proposals are clarified into correctly. So perform accurate takeoffs. I go back to this again. I've seen estimators miss buildings. I've seen them miss roof levels, especially anything that doesn't show on a roof plan. So if you're bidding in, especially in new construction world, you got to go through the elevations. You got to look at the wall sections. You got to look at the floor plans, because there are roofs that show up on these levels that will not show up on a roof plan. So again, you'll miss those if you don't take the time to do it. Avoid mathematical errors. You got an estimator that is making mathematical errors, you got a big problem. That cannot happen. Estimating softwares do limit the amount of mathematical errors because they do the calculation for you. But you still need to check to make sure that if it's 100 squares that was put in or digitized, it really is 100 squares. So again, it's still up to the estimator to get this. Errors should be at zero. Evaluate all pricing, quotations, expenses, subcontractors. Especially in today's world, you can't wing it. You can't say, I think it'll cost this. I'll throw this in and you're covered. No. And your subcontractors, you should have quotes or you should have agreements with your subcontractors on what they're going to charge you to do per job. so that you don't get nailed with the price increases on your end. Identify and always manage your risk on the estimating end. If it smells like a bad fish, you don't want to bring it up on the boat. We used to get a lot of problems out by not ever bidding the job to begin with. Sometimes the best job you ever got is the one, that you ever had is the one you never got, the one you never bid. So keep that in mind. Labor costs. Estimators have to know, and the best way to do this is with your historical data that we talked about, or if you're a newer company, you got to kind of run with what your experience are when you were in the field, or someone in your operations team helping you put this together. So you want to work that way with labor costs. Material and equipment costs the same way. You need to know what your materials actually cost and what the equipment's to go in. And again, watch these incomplete bid forms and documents. Extremely important to make sure that all these are filled out accurately and done correctly on the front end so you don't have problems on the back end. And that brings us to the end. I hope everybody got a good presentation out of it.